Hello students, I'm Dr. Pallavi Sethi. Today we shall take up class 12 English Core 301 NCERT Supplementary Reader Vistas. We'll be discussing lesson number 5 Should Visit Hit Mommy by John H. Updike. But before we begin students, let me share something about my childhood. Honestly speaking, I can't resist sharing this every time I teach this lesson in the class. I go down my memory lane. As small kids, we would wait for our summer break and rush to our grandparents' house where all the cousins would get together. It used to be a wonderful time playing, teasing, fighting, and then united again. I still remember in those summer afternoons when our parents would be asleep, all of us would sneak out from different rooms, tiptoed, and giggling run away to our grandpa's orchard. And then climb those mango trees and savor the juicy fruit sitting on the branches. And then at night, we would fight to take turns to sleep with our granny, clinging to her for the real treat of bedtime stories. I still can't remember when we would fall asleep listening to her melodious voice, which was more like a lullaby. Then next morning at breakfast table, we would see who had stayed awake till the end and could complete the story for us. But when we grew up, we realized most of her stories were all cooked up. She used to give us those moral lessons through them, and we actually would see the world through her eyes and believe in what she said. In fact, we always felt that whatever our parents said is right and we must follow it. But today's generation thinks otherwise. If you tell something to a little boy, he outright says, "You're wrong. My Google friend says this," and he'll point out towards the mobile. My God, this virtual world of the present generation, technology, electronic gadgets, all have taken a possession. Today, if any granny says, "Come, I'll tell you a bedtime story," outright comes the answer, "I can watch it on the YouTube." Gone are the days of the bedtime stories with strong moral lessons and the fantasy world that we lived in. Now, students, you might wonder, why am I telling you all this? Why? Because somewhere it relates to the lesson that we're going to do. I shall do it in 2 parts, and my objective is to tell you a little about the author, the characters, and a strong moral issue that the story raises, whether parents should decide what the children should do or let the children do what they like to do. It also deals with Father Jack's perspective and practical approach towards life, and that of the innocent girl Jo, 4 years old, who feels everything must have a happy ending. So let's open the book Vistas to lesson number 5, Should Visit Hit Mommy by John Updike. Now, to talk a little about the author, John Updike was an American writer, poet, and novelist. His mother, Linda Grace, was a famous writer. Her passion for writing had a great influence on John as a young boy. He explored the ordinary lives of his characters who often experienced personal turmoils and had to respond to crises around religion, marital infidelity, family issues, etc. Now, the story Should Visit Hit Mommy deals with Jack, the father, Jo, a 4-year-old daughter, Roger Skunk, a fictitious character, and Skunk's mommy, and then an old wizard. So let's begin with part 1. Every evening and for Saturday naps, Jack told his daughter Jo a story. This custom or ritual of storytelling began when Jo was 2 years old. She's turned 4 now. So her father Jack had to tell stories out of his head, and he felt almost empty in his head now. Jack kept an attractive golden book by the bedside to give Jo a feeling that he was telling stories out of it. Now that these were his self-created stories, so the basic tale was almost the same with slight variation. The main character was Roger, an animal. So one day he used to be Roger Fish, other day Roger Chipmunk, Roger Squirrel, and so on. Roger always had a problem. He went to an enormous wise owl with his problem. The owl would suggest him to go to the old wizard. The wizard would cast a spell with his magic wand and solve his problem for a fee. Roger always had a few pennies short, so the wizard would send him to the place where he could get the rest of it. The scheme of storytelling was especially fatiguing and futile on Saturdays because Jo never fell asleep in her naps anymore. She was alert, inquisitive, critical, and tried to catch up with the next course of action by repeatedly interrupting the story. Her little brother Bobby, who was 2, would fall asleep, but she wouldn't. Today, she wants the hero of the story to be Roger Skunk. So the father develops the story on the old outline and says, Roger Skunk smelt really bad, and no animals would play with him. They would tease him and cry out, "Oh, oh, here comes Roger Stinky Skunk," and then would run away. And poor Skunk would stand there all alone with tears rolling down his eyes. Now Jack tells his story with great zest, remembering certain humiliation of his own childhood, and he had no wish to hurry on as he was telling her something true and something she must know. Students, through this we can figure out that there's an autobiographical element in his story. Jack moves on with the story and says, quite upset with the reaction of the other woodland creatures as always, Skunk went to the owl crying. The owl thought and told him to go to the old wizard, who he hoped would be able to solve his problem. Now, students, as I told you, Jo is alert, so she interrupts her father a couple of times, making him miss the regular beat of his narration, and he feels somewhat irritated. So once again, as he talks about the wizard, she interrupts and asks, "Are magic spell real?" Now, this was a new reality phase. It means that Jo was alert and inquisitive. When Dad said spiders eat bugs, she confirmed from her mother if they really did. And when Mother said God is in the sky and all around, she turned to her father and with a sly, eager smile confirmed, "Is he really?" Jack continues. When Roger Skunk entered the old wizard's house, all the magic things lay in a jumbled, big, dusty heap. Jack here emphasizes students that it was because there was no cleaning lady in wizard's house. Again, he tries to bring out a truth that the ladies of the house keep it spick and span. So, as per the desire of Roger Skunk, the wizard gives him the smell of roses with the help of his magic wand and the magic spell. Then, as usual, the wizard demanded his fee. This time it's 7 pennies, but Roger had only 4. So, the wizard instructs him to the magic well and gets the remaining 3 pennies. Jack continues. Roger Fish cried, "Roses, roses." Here Jo interrupts again and corrects her father. "It's Roger Skunk. You said Roger Fish. Wasn't that silly?" Children, here too we get an evidence that there was not a wink of sleep in her eyes. She was alert, attentive, and she dared to call her father silly for his mistake. Now happy Roger Skunk played with the other woodland creatures who too liked his new smell. They played baseball, football, basketball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse. Now what's lacrosse, children? It's also a ball game. It has a stick like that of a hockey, but it has a net attached to the stick. So somewhere Jack is trying to tell his daughter indirectly about the importance of team games. As it starts getting dark and it's time for father to come back, Roger Skunk with his new smell of roses returned home. With this, we'll end part 1, but students, a quick recap with a few questions for you to answer. Question 1. What was the basic tale of Jack's story?